Hello, this is Beverly with scrapandthread.blogspot.com. I was playing with some stencils and discovered something that I thought was kind of fun that I wanted to share with you. These are layered stencils. They come from the stamp market. This particular set has two parts. The bottom part is a solid leaf base, and then the top part is the veining of the leaves. And here's an example that I did, and I used two different kinds of embossing powder. One is called verdigris, and that's the bottom part with the green, and then the top part I used a copper embossing powder. And I used this with just a sponge dauber and then heated it up twice, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. It is a little hard to see on camera that there is a two-toned effect with the embossing powder. However, the other example that I'm going to make will show you a little bit better. So I am using the Stamp Market's embossing ink, and it's also called a watermark ink, and that is a dauber from Nouveau. And you want to have whatever kind of ink pad you're using. It needs to be very juicy so that the embossing powder will stick to it very well. I usually use Versamark when I'm doing embossing, but because I had this brand new juicy pad, I thought I'd give it a try. You could also use pigment ink if that's what you have, and you would want to try to match the color of your pigment ink to whatever color embossing powder you're using. Or if you like the contrast, I mean, you can get some really cool effects with using different colors of pigment ink versus the embossing powder. But you might want to experiment a little bit and figure out what combinations you like first. And then once you have made sure that you have covered all of your cardstock really well with the ink, then you're going to use whatever color of embossing powder you want to use. You can also use clear if that's what you prefer. I happen to be using Close to My Heart Silver. I'm not sure if Close to My Heart sells embossing powder any longer. However, any silver would work. Most of them are fairly comparable in quality. I have tried many different kinds over the years, and I think that you would be successful with most embossing powders. You just, once you kind of figure out the technique, it's really fun and it's kind of magical to watch it change. This happens to be kind of well, it's silver, and so it's kind of shiny, and I always like the shiny and the bling. So for me, this was kind of a fun one to do after the green. I'm not saying the green was disappointing. It's just it was a different look. So depending on what you're going for, you'll decide what works for you. Both of these worked really well as card bases, so I'm not disappointed with either one of them. It's just kind of experimentation is part of the fun, and you can kind of figure out what colors work for you. So after applying the ink to the cardstock and then the embossing powder, you want to use whatever your heat tool is to heat it up so that it melts on there and it kind of hardens. If you've never done that before, you can see it melting and then it hardens. It will be a little warm to the touch for a little bit, but it's not hot. It won't burn you once it's done. Now you certainly can get burnt if you hold the heat gun too close to your hand, which is why I have that extra little piece of cardstock at the end. I cut it larger than what I knew that I needed. It gave me something to hold on to, and it also made it easier so that I could tape down the cardstock onto my work surface. I have found that even though I tape really carefully when I put the stencils down, I oftentimes end up scooching the cardstock underneath, and it doesn't make as nice of an image when I am stenciling. And in this particular instance, I really did want it to look like leaves because that was kind of the focus of this. If you were doing something more abstract, maybe you don't care. So because I do have that extra piece of extra size to the cardstock, I didn't need to try to tape down my cardstock in the exact same spot again. What I'm doing is matching up the stencil, the detail part of the stencil with the image that's already underneath. And some of the what I was pointing out there was that some of the embossing powder did not take, so I had not put enough ink down on the one leaf. And it's okay because I am going to use another color on top, and it'll be fine. And really, when you're making things, if you decide that you don't like how a particular part turns out, you can put a sentiment over it or another image or something. But it is handmade, and it's okay if it's not completely perfect. Sometimes things don't turn out the way that we anticipate or the way that we're hoping, but you can usually make it work out okay. There's a lot of things that you can do to salvage something if you are disappointed initially, and I think that most of the time, you're the only one that knows that it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to. So I am putting more ink down. It's the exact same embossing ink, and I'm just pushing it through with the sponge. And the second layer of the stencil is more delicate because of the veining. So I'm trying to be, a little bit careful, but still I want to make sure that all of that ink gets in there because I need it for the embossing powder to stick to. And that embossing powder that I'm using is called Tinsel Black. And I will try to find whether or not it's still made, but it does have a sparkle to it, and it is quite pretty. And I thought it would be a nice contrast with the silver underneath it. Okay, and then once you're all done with that, then you want to carefully lift up the stencil, and this one is a little bit more important to lift it up kind of straight up as if you can, just because as much of the detail that you can maintain on there would be great. Now, also another kind of embossing powder that might be nice to try is one that's called a fine or a detail embossing powder, and the reason for that is because that kind of embossing powder does fill in smaller, thinner areas in a really nice way, whereas this stuff is a little more chunky. Now my embossing powder, all of it is pretty old for the most part. I've been embossing for, I don't know, over a decade or so. So the good thing is it lasts. I don't see that there's any degradation in the quality of it. You can see there that there is a really beautiful sparkle to it even before it's been heated up. And I just want to make sure that I get good coverage, so I did put it on there twice. It's, so the one thing about this is that the embossing powder is messy, or I should say I'm messy, and so when I use it, I tend to, it tends to kind of get all over the place. And I do prefer this over glitter, on its own, though, because I make even a bigger mess with glitter. So here's one of the finished cards. This is the verdigris one. And the stamps that I used on that and also the die cuts are from the stamp market. And I don't believe that this set is actually available because I got it from a workshop from Crop and Create a couple of weekends ago, and it was in our kit. However, any die cut or any kind of stamps that you want to use would certainly work. The So Very Much is a stamp. The Thank You was a die cut. And I cut the big hearts and the small hearts out of the green, dark green cardstock. It's a textured cardstock that came from my stash. And so I'm trying to use up things out of my stash and not buy a lot of new things. And so anyway, hopefully you have a stash that you can delve into and get some stuff out of there too. The leaf shows up a lot better with the veining in person than it does on camera. But on the next card, that one shows up fairly well. The sparkle doesn't show up as well on camera as it does in real life. However, you can definitely see the impression of the top layered stencil. These stamps are from Gina K Designs, and I know that that friend one is available on some other stamp sets that's on her website. But once again, this stamp set came from the same workshop from a couple weekends ago, and so I'm not sure that it's available. And then those leaves that are there are also made from a Gina K product, and that is actually still available. I had used the exact same stencil with the leaves from the stamp market, and then I used Gina K Designs Glitz Glitter Gel in black, and made these leaves, and I have another video showing how to do that. And because the first stencil is solid, and it lends itself to making those kinds of embellishments really well, and I just stuck them up behind the flower stamp. Now, I did try to see if I added a little color, if I liked that better, and I really don't. I really like it the way that it is. I know it's monochromatic. It's probably not to everybody's taste, but it looks very elegant, and with that glitter in there and the glitz glitter gel also, it just makes a really nice, kind of an elegant card. And so I was pretty pleased with that. I popped up the image with the flowers, and that's up on foam dots, and then everything's kind of layered onto a card base. And I trimmed off a little bit of the leaves that I had embossed so that it fit that card panel a little bit better. And anyway, I think it turned out just fine. So I do appreciate that you spent some time with me today, and I hope that you can dig into your stash and find some stencils that you might want to try this technique with. If you have any questions, please do let me know. This is Beverly once again at scrapandthread.blogspot.com. Thank you so much for spending some time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.